Well, the usual suspects came out in force after Congressman Ron Paul answered a question regarding drug legalization during the recent South Carolina debate. Even though Congressman Paul's position is simply that the federal government has no authority in this matter one way or the other, and that obviously is the correct constitutional position. But beyond just that, it's wonderful to see somebody in public life who has the guts to challenge the orthodoxy regarding the war on drugs, a prevailing orthodoxy that I myself, to my eternal shame, accepted for years. And it turns out it's the usual government pack of lies I should have expected to start with. Just one problem of many is that the resources that are deployed to go after drug offenders are resources that are diverted from the protection of person and property. We saw this during Prohibition, and we see it still today. In fact, Judge James Gray, who is a trial judge out in California, tells the story of taking a vacation for a couple weeks and coming back and asking his court reporter, well, what were you doing during my 2-week absence? And the court reporter said, well, we had 25 felony preliminary hearings. 21 of them were drug-related. One of them involved a homeless guy who pushed his earthly possessions around in a shopping cart and who was found selling $10 worth of cocaine to somebody. And to go after that, well, let's see, we used a courtroom, a judge, a clerk, a court reporter, 2 bailiffs for half a day. We tied these things up, not to mention the prep work and everything else done by a public defender, a prosecutor, and 4 police witnesses. Now, we watch Law and Order, and we sort of feel like, boy, the system works, we're going after the bad guys, but typically the system is spending its resources on stuff like that, inane episodes like that. And then we've got the civil liberties violations, which are horrific. Because when you're dealing with drugs, you're dealing with what's called a victimless crime. That doesn't mean that drugs don't hurt anybody in certain senses. But there's no person who has been physically aggressed against, either in his person or property. In that type of crime, you have a victim who comes forth and reports the crime. Well, who's going to report a drug offense? So, of course, how do they find out about it? They have to use the search power. And, we got 1.4 million drug offenses every year that people get arrested for. Well, the search power is probably being used pretty aggressively here. And there's good evidence to believe that there are abuses every day in a system like this. But beyond that, it's the seizure power that's particularly open to abuse, because the government can simply seize your property simply because, and without a warrant, because it believes that it might have some connection to drugs. 80% of such people are never even charged with a criminal offense. And if you want to get your property back, good luck. You have to file a petition within a certain amount of time. You have to post a 10% bond. The whole procedure, the federal government isn't even obligated to explain to you. And then beyond that, the hurdles you have to clear regarding evidence, you have to prove your innocence in effect. No wonder most people don't even bother trying. And then beyond that, there's the simple futility of it all. Judge Volney Brown tells the story of a case in which, in San Diego, law enforcement decided we're going to go out and get and arrest all the heroin suppliers in San Diego on the same day. We're just going to get them all at once. And months and months and months of preparation went into this. You can't imagine the man-hours that went into it and the money. And sure enough, they got all of them in one day. And for about a week, it was difficult to get heroin in San Diego. Then by the second week, new suppliers appeared. And within a month, it was back to exactly the way it was before. The whole infrastructure was back in place as if nothing had been done, except this time the authorities now had no idea who was supplying the heroin. That is the dictionary definition of futility. And meanwhile, Colombia has been made virtually unlivable with left-wing and right-wing fighters going after each other. We've got assassinations of mayors, dozens and dozens and dozens of them. We've got military helicopters trying to destroy coca plants, but suppliers being able to produce more and faster than the military helicopters can destroy them. If people want something, they are going to get it. This is simple free market economics that conservatives are supposed to believe in. And here is the ultimate example of futility. $1 trillion has been blown on this. Kids are still using this stuff at the same rate that they were in 1970. And overdoses are way up. And they can't even keep the drugs out of prisons. And yet it just goes on, because this is yet another of the fiefdoms that I talk about in my book, Rollback. Because one of the things I want to roll back is the war on drugs that we're governed by. It's not that the federal government is looking out for our well-being and all they care about is the public good. It's a series of fiefdoms that seek greater power and increased budgets. And these fiefdoms are addicted to the money at all levels. So we've got to crack through this with everything we've got. And you're looking at a guy who is the squariest of the square. I have never seen, touched, or been tempted by any of these substances. But now that we know that millions of Americans have or are using these substances in complete defiance of the alleged war on drugs, another example of government propaganda, given that we've got this scale of an issue, and it's not going away, and it's perhaps even being intensified by the way the so-called war on drugs is being carried out, perhaps we have reached a moment where we realize that there may yet be a more humane way to deal with this problem, to deal with our fellow human beings, than to crack their skulls and throw them into a cage.